I never thought one quiet evening would test my loyalty the way it did. When I look back now, I realize the moment didn't begin at his house. It began weeks before, in the silence of my own relationship, in the spaces where conversations used to live but had slowly disappeared. Loneliness doesn't always come from being alone. Sometimes it comes from lying next to someone who no longer sees you. He and I had been friends for almost 2 years. We met through mutual friends at work, and from the beginning, he had an easy confidence about him. He listened more than he spoke. He remembered small details about my life, the way I liked my coffee, the projects I stressed about, even the dates that mattered to me. What started as casual conversations during breaks slowly turned into longer talks after work. There was nothing inappropriate about it. At least, that's what I told myself. At home, things were different. My partner and I had grown distant. Arguments weren't explosive anymore, they were cold and quiet. We stopped asking each other about our days. We stopped laughing at the same jokes. It felt like we were sharing a space, not a life. I tried to fix it at first. I brought up how I felt. I suggested we spend more time together. But every conversation ended the same way, with exhaustion instead of resolution. Eventually, I stopped trying. That's when my friendship with him became more meaningful than I expected. He would check in on me. He would say, "You don't sound okay today," even when I insisted I was fine. Being understood is a powerful thing. It fills a gap you didn't realize was growing. One evening, after a particularly tense day at home, my phone buzzed. It was him. He asked if I wanted to come over. Nothing unusual, we had hung out before, watched movies, talked about life. I hesitated for a second, glancing across the room at the silence sitting between me and my partner. Then I replied yes. His house felt different that night. Quieter. More private. We talked like we always did at first, about work, about random things online, about nothing important. But beneath his calm voice, I sensed something heavier. He seemed nervous, distracted. I noticed the pauses between his sentences. After a while, the conversation slowed. The room felt smaller. My heart started beating faster for reasons I couldn't fully explain. He looked at me in a way he hadn't before, not as just a friend, but as if he were searching for permission to say something he'd been holding back. Then he took a breath and spoke softly. "Can you stay tonight?" The words hung in the air between us. Not casual. Not innocent. Something deeper was hidden inside them. I felt a rush of heat rise to my face. My mind immediately went to my partner at home, unaware, trusting that I didn't answer right away, and in that silence, I realized this wasn't just an invitation to stay. It was an invitation to cross a line. The silence after his question felt heavier than anything he could have said. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't even look at him. Stay tonight. 2 simple words, but they carried weight. Not because of what they meant on the surface, but because of what they implied beneath it. I tried to steady my breathing. Why? I finally asked, my voice quieter than I intended. He didn't look away. That alone told me this wasn't a joke or a careless suggestion. He ran a hand through his hair, nervous in a way I had never seen before. "Because I don't want you to leave," he admitted. "Not tonight." My heart began to race. This wasn't about convenience. It wasn't about it being late. There was something deeper in his tone, something vulnerable. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I could hear the ticking of a clock somewhere in the house. The ordinary sound felt painfully loud. I'd been wanting to say something for a long time, he continued. I didn't know how. And I didn't want to ruin what we have. But every time you talk about how unhappy you are, it's hard for me to pretend I don't feel anything. My stomach dropped. Feel anything. The words were careful, but the meaning wasn't. He wasn't confessing something impulsive. This had been building. Quietly. Patiently, that I should have stood up. I should have reminded him, and myself, that I was in a relationship. That there were boundaries. Instead, I stayed seated, frozen between shock and something far more dangerous, validation. When you're with me, he said softly, you seem lighter. You laugh. You breathe differently. I care about you. More than I probably should. There it was, not aggressive. Not demanding. Just honest, and honesty can be seductive when you've been starving for it. My thoughts spiraled. This was wrong. I knew it. I could picture my partner at home, unaware of the emotional shift happening miles away. But another voice inside me whispered something selfish. When was the last time someone looked at you like this? When was the last time someone admitted they cared? Loneliness can blur lines you once thought were permanent. I don't want to hurt anyone, I said, though I wasn't sure who I was trying to convince, him or myself. I'm not asking you to, he replied quickly. I needed you to know. The space between us felt charged now. Not physical, not yet, but emotional. The kind of tension that builds from words left unspoken for too long. That I stood up, pacing slowly, trying to think clearly. If I stayed, it wouldn't be innocent. Even if nothing happened. The very act of choosing to remain would mean something. Emotional betrayal doesn't always begin with touch. Sometimes it begins with permission. I should go, I whispered, but I didn't move toward the door. That he stepped closer, not touching me, just close enough for me to feel his presence. If you walk out, I'll respect it, he said. But don't pretend you don't feel this too. That was the moment my certainty cracked, because I did feel it, not just attraction, but understanding. Comfort. Being seen, and that made the decision far more complicated than it should have been. That I knew whatever choice I made next would change something. The only question was, what was I willing to lose? For a few seconds, I closed my eyes. That I wanted clarity. I wanted a sudden rush of certainty that would make the decision simple. But life doesn't work like that. There was no loud alarm telling me to leave, no dramatic sign warning me to stay away. There was only my heartbeat and the quiet truth that I was standing on the edge of something irreversible. When I opened my eyes, he was still there, waiting, not pressuring, not moving closer, just watching me. Like my answer mattered. I can't pretend I don't feel something, I admitted. Saying it out loud felt like stepping over a thin crack in the ground. But feeling something and acting on it are two different things. He nodded slowly, though disappointment flickered across his face. That I took a step back, creating space between us. That small movement felt symbolic, like drawing a boundary that had almost disappeared. I'm not happy, I continued, my voice shaking slightly. But that doesn't give me the right to hurt someone else. The words tasted bitter because part of me still wanted to stay. Part of me wanted to ignore responsibility and sink into the comfort he was offering. It would have been easy. He made it easy. No pressure. No demands. Just warmth and understanding, and maybe that was what scared me the most. That if he had been reckless or disrespectful, I could have walked away angry. But he wasn't. He was sincere. Vulnerable. Honest about his feelings. That made the temptation feel justified instead of wrong. That he looked down at the floor, then back at me. "I don't want to be the reason your life falls apart," he said quietly. I didn't want to keep lying about how I feel." His honesty hurt more than if he had tried to convince me that. I grabbed my phone from the table, holding it tightly in my hand as if it could anchor me to reality. My partner's name flashed in my mind. The shared memories. The years we had built together. The promises we had made when things were good. Somewhere along the way, we had lost each other. But losing connection didn't mean the history disappeared. "I should have fixed my relationship before letting this get this far," I whispered, more to myself than to him. That he didn't argue. The room felt colder now. The tension that once felt electric had turned heavy, thick with what almost happened. Emotional lines had been crossed, even if physical ones hadn't. I knew that. He knew that. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what?" I asked. "For putting you in this position." But the truth was, we had both walked into it. That I moved toward the door this time, my steps steady even though my chest felt tight. Each step felt like choosing discomfort over desire. As my hand rested on the doorknob, I paused. "If things were different," he began. That I didn't let him finish. "They're not," I said gently, and that was the hardest part. Outside, the night air hit my face, cool and sharp. I inhaled deeply, trying to clear my thoughts. I hadn't stayed. I hadn't crossed the final line. But something inside me had shifted. I couldn't pretend that nothing had happened. When I got home, the lights were dim. My partner was sitting on the couch, scrolling on their phone. They glanced up briefly. "You're late," they said. "Yeah," I replied softly. They didn't ask where I had been. That silence hurt more than any accusation would have done. I went to bed that night staring at the ceiling, replaying every second in my mind. I had walked away, but I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. That my relationship wasn't just struggling. That it was breaking, and if I didn't face that reality soon, the next time temptation knocked, I might not be strong enough to refuse. The days after that night felt heavier than I expected. I had walked away, but the weight of what almost happened followed me everywhere. Every quiet moment at home reminded me that something was broken, not because of him, but because of us and my partner. And I moved around each other like strangers sharing a hallway. Short conversations. Polite tones. No depth. No effort. And for the first time, I stopped blaming only them. I had been drifting too. Instead of fighting for what we once had, I had searched for comfort somewhere else. That realization forced me to make a choice. That a week later, I asked my partner to sit down with me. There was no anger in my voice, no dramatic buildup. Just honesty. "I should have offered months ago. We're not okay," I said quietly. They looked at me, surprised by the directness. Maybe we had both been pretending for too long. That we talked for hours that night. Not about him. Not about temptation. But about us. About the distance that had grown slowly, almost invisibly. About the loneliness we both felt but never admitted. For the first time in a long time, we weren't defensive. We were vulnerable, and vulnerability felt different when it was directed toward the person I had committed to. I didn't confess the details of that evening, but I did confess something just as important. I'd been feeling disconnected for a while. And instead of fixing it, I almost gave up. The word almost hung heavily in the air. They asked if there was someone else. I paused, choosing my words carefully. There was a moment, I admitted. But I walked away. That truth hurt them. I could see it in their eyes. But it also shook us awake. For the first time, the possibility of losing each other felt real. And the weeks that followed, things weren't magically repaired. Trust doesn't instantly rebuild. Connection doesn't automatically return. But effort did. We started talking again, not about schedules or bills, but about feelings. About fears. About expectations we never voiced that I also distanced myself from him. Not because he was a bad person, but because I understood something clearly now: emotional boundaries matter just as much as physical ones. You don't wake up one day and decide to betray someone. You slowly allow gaps to form. You allow validation from the wrong place to feel harmless. Loneliness had made me vulnerable. Attention had made me reckless. But reflection made me accountable. That I realized that night wasn't about passion. It wasn't about desire. It was about wanting to feel seen. And instead of demanding that visibility inside my relationship, I had almost accepted it outside of it. Temptation doesn't always look dangerous. Sometimes it looks like comfort. Like understanding. Like the thing you've been missing. But comfort built on someone else's trust is fragile. Months later, I can still remember how close I came to making a different choice. And sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had stayed. Maybe it would have been brief. Maybe it would have destroyed everything. What I know for sure is this: betrayal doesn't begin with touch. It begins with silence. With unmet needs. With conversations avoided. That night didn't just test my loyalty, that it forced me to confront the parts of myself that were willing to escape instead of repair. And in the end, walking away wasn't just about saving my relationship, that it was about saving the person I wanted to be.